6 years ago, I lived out here in the woods of Olive Bridge, New York, and this clearing here was, I made this clearing over the period of a year, mostly clearing for firewood, but knowing that I would try to replant. And at the end of that work, I found the farm that I moved to, and we did shape the land here with an excavator, and then I planted some trees, and pretty much has received sporadic care since. And by sporadic, I mean maybe once a year, every year, I came to plant some more trees and did nothing else. So, just some interesting things to note. This won't apply to too many areas, but this whole zone has been with essentially no human vegetation management for 6 years. And you would think that in 6 years there'd be some more regrowth than this of woody plants. And there's that little that little birch sapling over there that was here when I when I finished clearing. That walnut has been planted, and then other than that, finally a couple white pines are starting to pop up. Got those two right there, and then this plant called sweet fern, Comptonia peregrina, really wonderful smell. And that's about it. And what's holding the ground in this largely pre-woody succession state is this bracken fern. It's a mat, and now it's died back. We just finally got a first frost, but it had mostly died back before that. Anyway, it can almost completely stop the intrusion of young saplings. You can see there's a little hop hornbeam sapling, and a white pine, all seedlings. And when they germinate under this mat, they can't make it at all. They don't get any light. And it can keep, what foresters say is that bracken can prevent succession from continuing on, which I was skeptical at first, but seeing now the state of this place 6 years in, it definitely has some merit. It slows it down. Eventually, those white pines will make it in, they'll shade it out, they'll start dropping pine needles, and things will go from there. But it certainly has been making planting any trees here incredibly difficult. One thing that's interesting to note is that the brown area, all that bracken that's brown, including over here, that's the quote-unquote native soil. Where everything is green, it's hard to make it out, but there are four actually, planting berms. One's there, the next one's up there, and then there's one up there. And those are very large berms. They're about 4 feet tall in the center and about 6 or 7 feet wide, and then 20 to 40 feet long. Those were made with an excavator. Basically, there's just no topsoil here. It's just, you can't really see it. Everything's covered with leaf and vegetation, but it's mostly just rocks here with some soil in between the rock voids. And so we just scraped it up into these big, roughly on contour planting berms. And I planted probably 30 trees and gave them some minimal protection, and basically every single one of them died. So they mostly being killed by deer. That's the other force here that's changing the succession, is that deer will eat absolutely anything palatable to them here, and they don't really care for the bracken or the Comptonia. So I planted them, and they mostly died without protection, and then I planted a couple with tree rings. And that's the main thing that I wanted to share today is this is the classic window screen Volgard, which is just regular window screen that is wound up sort of like a burrito. You wind it up as tight as you can and then unwind it around the base of the tree. And that way you can walk away from the tree not worrying about it, that it will girdle the tree. If you have any kind of wire or zip tie or anything to secure that other than just the winding the window screen itself so that it can unwind as the tree grows, if you have anything attached, it'll eventually girdle the tree. Even if it's relatively weak, it can still girdle the tree. And then the tree guard here probably can come off now, although this is the time of year where a buck could come in and rub this and still kill the tree, so I'll probably leave it. I do like to make sure that nothing like this is happening. You don't want it to be touching. I might try to fix that a little bit later more thoroughly. But this is the only, well, this and one other tree are the only ones that are well above deer browse, and they'll be fine. And there's an apple here in the foreground. And there's actually a persimmon that made it. I'll go show you that real quick. But the bad news is that I came back probably a year after planting the walnut and the persimmon and apple. And I was like, well, it's hard to get out here. There's no fence, obviously. There's huge deer pressure. It's an open space where deer definitely come to eat any of this fresh growth because the sun's actually hitting the ground here. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just use some of these tree tubes that I hear so much about. And because they're lightweight, I can carry a whole bunch up here. And I have found them to be a total failure. All of the treetops look like this. This is hard to see here. This one is a little bit more hopeful. This is a shagbark. No, this is a shellbark hickory that I planted here. And to me, the growth looks very weird. And I guess the terminal bud is out here and pretty exposed to deer browse. So we'll see what happens with that. I guess they're just not tall enough. Here's one of those tree guards, and I don't know what I was doing. I just put some stakes to stick out of it to scare the deer off. It's more like an art installation, probably pretty non-functional. But this is a persimmon. It's lost its leaves already, but it's well above deer browse as well. So that will be nice. At least a persimmon and a walnut. But what I'm seeing is a lot of this, where the growth in these tree tubes, they say that they can get light, but it's sort of weird, squirrely, contorted growth. And then every single one of them seems to have multiple stems coming out. And then this terminal bud has been chomped off, and there's a side shoot which also might be eaten. So you could just say, well, maybe I need taller ones, or maybe I never need to use tree tubes again, because not one of them has got a tree through the deer pressure. And it seems like the growth inside is very weird and sort of weak. I mean, they're getting some light for sure, but suffice to say, for anything less than, I plan on trying to plant maybe between 5 and 8 more trees out here this fall. Later on, once I start digging all my nursery stock up and bring out some good ones here. And I'm absolutely going to go with the Volgard and the tree ring. You know, it can be out of an old piece of wire fencing. And those seem to work pretty darn well in areas that have crazy deer pressure. One thing I will say is that the diameter on these tree guards is not what I like to do. I like to cut a piece that's at least 4 feet tall and I go about 10 feet long. And this tree guard here, I think I put these pieces of bamboo in there because the deer were walking up to the edge, which of course they still did after that bamboo. I knew it wasn't going to work, and it didn't. But it looks funny. And so if you have a 4-foot tall, 10 foot long piece of the deer fence, you put that around, and it gives enough space that the deer can't easily reach over and eat the shoots, and it's not so much space that they could jump inside and then jump back out. It's an awkward opening for them, so they can't really get in there. So 4 feet tall, 10 or 12 feet long, and that's your tree ring size. And that and a Volgard seems to be sufficient to get trees through completely catastrophic deer browse in a place where you never visit them. This is the second time I've been here this entire year, and if I had done that with 4 more trees, a space like this, really low intensity management, and in another 5 years, with full light and the complete mat of this bracken, preventing really any other woody competition, these trees will be the entire canopy of this spot. So it's actually kind of a cool opportunity to work with a type of vegetation that is totally canopy suppressing or woody plant suppressing. And it may be a real bear to get the plants through that, but once you do, you realize, well, I'm not having to do any work of cutting down any competing trees that can grow twice as fast as these trees that would eventually get to the canopy. The bracken is doing that for me, or whatever other plant you have in your area that's suppressing woody growth could be a real ally to help you select what's going to take over the canopy there.